to the other. Being Afreximbank and coming to promote AfTA, would you consider addressing this issue where countries should see should seamlessly work with each other in terms of trade, such that I think if it's done this way, then the next 30 years you'll be counting a bigger impact on Africa than 90 billion. So if AfTA works well, would you consider this topic during your AGM? Thank you.
Okay, so there's a gentleman in white. If you kindly permit, so we answer President Rama. You want to answer? Okay. No, I was saying you can fill the questions when you're ready. The first one is from Kingsley, and I think he's talking about he wants to know the bank's total disbursement to Ghana over the years. He has a few other questions, but I'll take Kingsley's first question. I'm sorry, Kingsley. And then the second one is from John, who says the Director General of AfTA is asking for Africans providing more value to their products rather than just providing raw commodities. The third one is from Mike of UTV, who is looking at reducing the barriers which seem to be mitigating against the successes that AfTA could talk, if my summarizing of the questions are correct.
Thank you very much. As the governor mentioned, Ghana was the first recipient of a Afreximbank facility on September 1, 1993, when we did the Ghana Cocoa Board transaction. Since then, we've supported Ghana in many ways, many sectors, the aviation, agriculture, processing, financial institutions, energy, hospitality, name it, we had done so. And over $7 billion of interventions we've done here. Current exposure to Ghana is in excess of $1.7 billion. Pipeline transactions, almost $2 billion. So that is the extent of what we're doing in Ghana. Despite the challenges the country faced last year, we never withdrew. We continued to support the different businesses here. I think there's hardly any bank in Ghana that doesn't benefit from a line of credit of some sort from Afreximbank. So Ghana has been a strong supporter, and because Ghana has been a strong supporter, Afreximbank in turn also has been a strong supporter of Ghana. And you mentioned creating an IMF-like institution for Africa. I know there's something that the African Development Bank proposed to do. The only thing I can tell you is that Afreximbank provides certain kinds of support that will help countries to wade through difficulties and make it easier for them to manage shocks, so that the frequency of going to IMF can be reduced. But on top of that, we just launched last year, working with the UN Economic Commission for Africa, a facility called the Liquidity and Sustainability Facility. You know, what happened to Ghana really was a liquidity issue. It wasn't as if Ghana was insolvent. The challenge Ghana faced was a liquidity issue that put Ghana in the situation that it found itself last year. Because the markets went the way they did, so access to those markets to refinance maturing obligations became difficult. And of course, the usual domino effects follow, and usually then the economy gets worse for it. So what the Liquidity and Sustainability Facility does is that it introduces a repo for African debt instruments. We do not have that. Other geographies have repos. And because we do not have repo, similarly rated countries, that is in Africa and Europe, you find a situation where the one in Africa is paying so many times higher than the one in Europe or elsewhere where there are repos. And that is because the bonds issued by Africans do not have liquidity. So the LSF, the Liquidity and Sustainability Facility we're implementing now, which we hope will grow, provides an avenue for that liquidity. And we believe that what it will then do is that it will shrink the yield on African issued bonds, improve their pricing, and makes it easier for African countries to raise money and avoid situations where tight liquidity situations kind of precipitates economic crisis. The issue of industrialization, we have 4 pillars that underpin the strategy we are running, the 6th strategy plan. The arrowhead of our strategy is intra-African trade and AFCFTA implementation. The other pillar which are what supports the arrowhead are industrialization, export development, of course, our usual global trade finance leadership, and our financial performance and soundness as the 4th. With regard to industrialization and export development, the goal there is to expand value addition on the continent. And the value addition, I recognize 2 things, that we have, yes, we have resources, we have cocoa, we have copper and all those. And as much as possible, where it becomes economical, we can add value to those. But we also regard our biggest resource to be our people, the human beings we have. So it may well be that you may actually find that you can export your raw materials as raw, because if the cost of processing it is very high, if it's capital intensive to process, whereas you have another activity that is labor intensive, you may continue to export the capital intensive the way it is and create value where you have labor intensive activities. So our strategy takes account of all of this, and it is working very well. In Cote d'Ivoire, for example, Afreximbank helped create 100,000 ton processing capacity that made it possible for Cote d'Ivoire to become the #1 in adding value, semi-processing of cocoa. We have supported many countries to do cotton and all those. We have an investment in Arise integrated industrial platforms, through which we've developed industrial parks in Gabon, in Togo, in Benin. We are building in Cote d'Ivoire, we are building in Nigeria, we developed the one for meat packing in Chad. In Rwanda, we are doing a battery park, 2 parks for battery in Zambia and the DRC, and then another park in Kenya. But not only, if you for a moment forget those ones where we are taking a proprietary interest in through Arise, we are also financing the companies that are doing the same or who are in industries. For example, we are proud to have contributed very strongly in the Dangote refineries that will be opening on the 22nd. The Dangote refinery is perhaps the largest heavy industry ever done on the continent. It costs about $19 billion. We we are the largest financier of that project. So the issue of value addition is a priority for us. Most of the things we do are not only just creating the goods, but we know that if you create the goods and you don't have the markets, the industries will collapse. So we've also developed an export trading company initiative where we are helping to support the budgets of export trading companies, use trade information digitally, and of course through the trade fairs we're organizing to create access to markets, and also making sure that whatever we do promotes the growth of regional supply chains. And that then leads me smoothly to the last question that was asked about the difficulties in trading amongst ourselves. Yeah, you see, you have to go back and understand where Africa is coming from. Don't forget that we had years of colonialism, colonial legacy. And the strategy of colonialism was divide and rule. So we were split into 55 atomistic countries, and which were run in a way that they hardly related with their neighbors, but only with the metropolitan powers, in such a way that they could only produce raw materials and export to the metropolitan powers and receive finished goods back. So the arrangement was to put those countries in a perpetual terms of trade imbalance. You only know about it when there is a shock. Because when there is no shock, in a dynamic way, you find money to pay, but you are always owing money because you export something that is of less value than what you import. And that was the way it was organized. So to break through these things is not easy, as you know. And in 1963, when the first meeting of the Organization of African Unity was held, breaking it was something topmost on their mind. At that meeting, they said they wanted to create a continental free trade agreement. They said they wanted to start a trade fair. They said they wanted to start a transit scheme because they knew that many countries had, we have about 16 landlocked countries. We have about 87,000 kilometers of borders. So they wanted to have those transit schemes. They wanted to have an arrangement that would help them trade their commodities among themselves for value addition and industrialization. None of these things have been implemented, but they remained critical, crucial to dealing with the issue you raised. So I'm very pleased today that of all those things they listed, I think Afreximbank has helped to deliver them. They wanted to create what they called then an African Payment and Clearing Union. As the governor said, we have delivered a Pan-African payment and settlement system, making it possible to pay for African goods in local currency. It's the early days, but there's no doubt that you pick up and it will change things. And when that payment system that makes it possible for us to domesticate all intra-African trade payments become fully adopted, it also impacts our foreign debt status. Because if it happens that an Egyptian contractor comes to Ghana to build roads, and Ghana pays in Ghanaian cedi not to borrow dollars or euro or yuan to do that, it changes the situation because you are paying with your local currency for that. So we've been able to do that. As for trade fair, we've delivered the intra-African trade fair, which is done once every 2 years. The next one will be held in Egypt between the 9th and 15th of November this year. The one we had last time in 2021 in Durban attracted 32,000 people, deals of 42 billion, but we believe that this one coming in a few months will even be bigger. We've also launched a transit scheme which we piloted in the commercial region and the LDNI to make it a global thing. Because today, if somebody carrying goods will be crossing more than one border, they will have to post transit bonds at each border. So what we've done is to create a regional transit bond, so that with the Afreximbank bond, you can go from Cape to Cairo with just that bond. You don't need to stop to put it. So all these issues you're talking about, stopping at the ports and all that, will be minimized. We've also started dealing with the issue of standards. Because we have 55 countries, every country has its own standard. So what we've done is provide grants, help mobilize grants to support the African Regional Standard Organization to harmonize standards. We so far harmonized 155 standards. We've done for automotives, we've done for pharmaceuticals and medical equipment. We are now doing for textiles. And we prioritize those based on what the Council of Ministers of Trade told us to prioritize. But one thing is to have the standards, the other is to have the testing and certification. So we created a subsidiary called the Africa Quality Assurance Center that is building testing and certifications labs across the continent. We have built about 5 of them. One already is finished, it's operating. In a joint venture, a partnership with Bureau Veritas. And we also believe that the only thing that can make us vote these 110 borders is digital technology. And that is why we have invested so heavily in what we call the Africa Trade Gateway, a digital platform that makes it possible for trade information to be made available easily at the touch of a button, for trade regulations to be made available the same way. We believe that way people can find their markets easily, because the biggest problem we have is that somebody in Ghana does not know what to buy from Malawi, for example. But we know what to buy from China. We know what to buy from India. We know what to buy from Europe, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the things we are doing. Early days for some of them, but a journey of 1,000 kilometers, they say, starts with one step. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Orama. I'll take a few questions online and come back in here. I have one from Cote d'Ivoire. It's from Issouf Kamagati of the Financial Afrique. And I think this goes to the Honorable Minister. It says the IMF has validated the 3 billion support program to Ghana. This is good news. What emergency measures will the government of Ghana adopt to anticipate possible shocks in the future? That's the first question. Then I have one for President Orama from Cameroon. It's from Afrique 24. The journalist is Fraten Indasiya Senga. Forgive me, I hope I haven't crucified the name. It says the 2023 General Assemblies also mark an important milestone with the celebration of the bank's 30th anniversary. What adjustments will you make to meet the trade needs of African states? And I believe this goes to President Orama. Then I have Brian Ngugi from Nairobi, from the Standard newspaper. And he says, does the Afreximbank provide funding to bolster falling foreign exchange reserves? If so, which countries are eligible to apply? So we'll take these three, and then I'll come back to our good people in the room. Mr. Minister.
Well, thank you. A very good question. I didn't want this discussion to focus on the IMF, we are here to celebrate Afreximbank because Afreximbank is doing a lot in its own right, and we have to celebrate that. But to answer this question, the program just approved is intended to achieve a number of objectives. Macroeconomic stability is key to this. We want to reduce inflation. We want our currency to be stable and stronger. We want interest rates to come down so that we can lend more to the private sector. And above all, we want to use this as the platform for accelerating growth. But the second objective is debt sustainability. We want to be able to reduce our debt levels to sustainable levels. Somebody may ask, so why do we want Afreximbank to increase its presence if we want to reduce debt levels to sustainable levels? But it is possible we can do this because Afreximbank has been offering Ghana less expensive, less costly facilities, concessional facilities, and we think that we can continue to collaborate and work together to increase concessional lending, which will not be too onerous a cost on our debt levels. But the third one, which is more important, is to build our resilience so that we do not become easily vulnerable to shocks. And to be able to do this will require the implementation of significant structural reforms. This program has a big component on structural reforms. Up to 50 different structural reforms are to be implemented through this program. This is how we can build our resilience so that we can be able to withstand shocks that may come against us in future. So this is what I can say to the question, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. President Rama, would you take your question, please?
Thank you very much. We're not IMF. Well, but we support countries. If you recall, I said a few things about supporting countries to make sure they didn't go into default. Because normally when you get into a shock, you have a backlog of letters of credit, trade debt payments that come in. Normally, because they come like that, they hit the reserves, the countries then maybe default because they don't have enough money. And the government mentioned the issue about swap facilities. We provide swap facilities which central banks use to beef up their reserves. We also indirectly, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a reserve boosting mechanism, but indirectly to help boost it. When we provide certain kinds of facilities that help even commercial banks to pay for those backlog of trade debt payments, the effect is that it delays the call on the reserves of the country. So it also helps to boost. But we do not technically do balance of payment lending. Eligibility for you to access our facility, first you have to be from a member country of the bank, or you must be buying something from a member country of the bank. The rest are things that we ask to determine whether the deal is bankable or not. But the fundamental thing, we lend to African countries. Those buying or selling something to Africa, there must be an African leg in what we do, or Caribbean leg now in what we do. So it's Afro-Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Orama. Okay, so I'm back here. Apparently, I can get missing and still be seen. Okay, there's a gentleman in white. Yes, please.
Okay, my name is Max Solofori. I write for the Chronicle newspaper. President, I would like to take you to Europe and bring you to Africa and then to Ghana. My question is centered on forest reserves. We are all seeing what is happening across the globe, and the war in Ukraine, what it is bringing as far as Syria is concerned. In Africa, AFTA is also here trying to help us trade amongst ourselves. And we have Afreximbank. We're going to have a 4-day meeting here in Accra. Would you want to discuss how best the bank could support industries or companies in Africa that have interest in producing, let's say, rice and some things that we import, so that in the near future we don't have to use the little forest reserves to import things like that. I know in Ghana the government has already banned importation of rice and others, and there are some companies in Ghana who have taken steps to producing those things. Would you want to consider discussing it at the meeting for a way out? Thank you.
Okay, there's a gentleman here.
Thank you very much. My name is Winston Taki of Metro TV. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Afreximbank for phenomenal contribution to the African continent. 30 years is not mean feat. One thing I would like to understand is in the next 30 years, possibly, God willing, we will all be alive. What should we be looking forward to, the plan for the continent in terms of financing? Another aspect I'd like you to touch on is climate financing. Whether we are ready to self-finance climate-related projects on the continent, which at the moment we need critically. Energy is also a very important aspect to pushing our industrialization drive, because most African countries have plans, but the supply and the cost of energy has made it difficult to push the trade activities in African regions and also amongst countries. Thank you very much.
So I'll take a third one, and then President Turama can take the question, since all of them seem to be going his way.
Thank you very much. The name is Justice. I work for the Xinhua News Agency of China. Now, you mentioned the issue about the PAPs, and I would like to know, I was expecting you to tell us where we have gotten to in the implementation, because it was right here in this hall last year that you and the AFCFTA launched the PAPs, and there was a lot of expectation. And where have we gotten to? Secondly, I would like to bring your mind back to a question that was asked earlier about how to help Africa, leverage on our commodities to actually become a production hub rather than just a source of raw materials. Now, when you look at the issue about the BRICS discussions that are going on, you are beginning to see countries looking at ways of avoiding, currency that has been weaponized to be used, in various ways when it suits the countries that, control those currencies. But here in Africa, we have, a very large percentage of the world's natural resources. So when you listen to the discussions going around about the BRICS countries and, how they are trying to, create that space for themselves to avoid a currency that is being weaponized against the whole world, what ideas are you picking from it? What indications are we seeing from it that you can use at your meetings here in Accra that will benefit the entire continent? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. President Urama.
Thank you. I think the first question was essentially whether we finance import substitution. That is what I get from there. We finance exports, But we also support intra-African trade. Supporting intra-African trade is kind of promoting regional value chains. But in the process of supporting exports, we also then support import substitution. Because what we support for export, most of the time, first feeds into the domestic industries or the domestic market before the excess goes out. So to that extent, yes, we do support activities that also produce goods from the point of view of import substitution, although that is not the primary goal for us. But as we implement our trade mandate, import substitution then comes in. I think the second question is about forex reserve. No, I've done with that forex reserve. What the next 30 years will look like.
Okay.
Well, for the next 30 years, what we think is that Africa will be as strong as its financial institution bring it to. And for that, its financial institutions can only make Africa stronger if they themselves are strong. So we place a lot of emphasis on creating a very strong, large bank. It's only when you are like that that you can earn a seat on the table. That is when you can offer more concessional loans. That's when you can offer more diversified products. That's why when you can restore dignity to your people. So we want an Afreximbank that will be much bigger than it is today. It took us 30 years to reach 30 billion. And I say what I say because I joined the bank from day one. So I remember that our total assets in our first year of operation, 94-95, was about $140 million. By December, it was total assets and guarantees were $32 billion. Took 30 years, but I expect that we will add another 30 years in less than 6 years. We will. I also look at the Bank of the Future. We have a project called Bank of the Future project. That Bank of the Future project will be a digital Afreximbank. And that is why we've made a lot and continue to make a lot of investments on digital. I mentioned when I was speaking what we call the Africa Trade Gateway. The Africa Trade Gateway is a super platform that makes it possible for people to access trade information, access customer due diligence information, the governor talked about the MANSA, access e-commerce platform, access the payment platform, access credit facilities, and so on. I do not think that my grandchildren will approach an Afreximbank the way our customers approach us today. So we have that long-term vision of the Bank of the Future that will be digitally driven. So essentially, a big bank that understands the continent, that continues to put Africa first, a bank that is digitally driven, again, all for the interest for which it was established. And you also, another person, you asked about energy, climate change, energy financing. I think everybody knows now that the issue of climate is something is important, but Africa and Africans are more of victims than contributors to the problem. We have the flooding that happened in Malawi, in South Sudan, in all those places. We have desertification everywhere. We have the island economies coming under the sea, and so on and so forth. We do not generate the carbon that is causing all these things. We all know that. As a matter of fact, the Central Africa is a carbon sink. So it absorbs more carbon than it emits. So what do you tell somebody who absorbs more carbon than emits to do again? So we know, if some of you go to your villages, you will find that the young people going to school are studying with maybe kerosene lamp. Then what are you going to tell that person, to the energy efficient, to switch off the kerosene lamp? So we know that we are not contributing, but we are the victims. And that is why we think the emphasis for us and for the continent should be on adaptation. Be on adaptation. Because that's what the risks are for us. In the global discussion about this, we must put pressure on those who contribute the most of the carbon to reduce their carbon emissions. While we deal with adaptation. If we look at the per capita, the per capita emissions and compare it with what you call the targets that were set for emissions for things to begin to normalize again, and we have done this, you will find that Africans still have a headroom to emit more, because we need to have the energy to run our industries. But others have to reduce theirs for things to be better. But I know it's a long talk. The weak can only talk and do nothing. So the best thing for us is to deal with the clear and present danger, which is the adaptation, the flooding, all the things. How do we help the countries that do not have enough rain? How do we help them to build dams, use irrigation to produce, so that people are not displaced? That's why we have launched a facility we called a climate adaptation facility. We are now trying to implement in Kenya, and hopefully we will replicate elsewhere. We do not have much money, so the money we have, we think we put it to use to deal with what we think is the greatest problem the continent faces because of the climate. And the PAPS implementation status, yes, since that time, PAPS has started commercial operations. It's still at low levels, because when you start something as big as that, there are so many changes that need to happen, institutional changes, process changes. So those are happening now. We've now introduced a commercial bank settlement model, which some countries asked for. That required some tweaking of the system and the governance framework, and so on. So it started operations, started commercial services, but you will not notice it. In fact, many of the banks, I think Ghana Commercial Bank, I don't know whether you are the first, Kofi, to do PAPS here. So, but before long, you will see the activities ramp up very well. So it's operating commercial services, and we hope and expect that it will expand very rapidly in the months and years ahead. And the BRICS, I think the BRICS should learn from us. We started this issue of payment system for Africa, but ours is not about any weaponization, any currency. We're just doing something that we thought will help us promote intra-African trade, will help us deal with the problems we face. It's not normal that we spend $5 billion a year for transaction just going from one country in Africa to another for money we don't have. It's not also good that because of these multiple currencies, we cannot trade amongst ourselves. So we're just trying to deal with that. The BRICS arrangement may have another purpose to deal with weaponization. So ours is of different purpose. So we cannot, I don't think we can learn from each other because the methods will be different. So.
Thank you very much, President Turama. Okay.
To Mr. President's responses on the energy sector investment, Mr. President, this can be considered an ambassadorial role or consultancy. I'm sure you think about that.
Yes.
Okay. But what I want to say is that as far as energy sector is concerned, Afreximbank is already investing in Ghana's energy sector, and they have committed up to about 528 million United States dollars in pipeline projects in the energy sector. Whether you are talking, yes. And this covers VRA capital infrastructure, trade finance facility for BDCs, bulk distribution companies, a new oil refinery, and then also a new oil terminal. These are all pipeline projects that are advanced, in negotiation, and we are very hopeful that negotiations will be concluded soon, so we can get these investments in Ghana to help build our infrastructure base for the energy sector. Ghana is the hub, the energy hub, even with the Dangote refinery. We are the energy hub of West Africa. Because products from Dangote refinery will have to pass through Ghana to many landlocked countries, around us, Burkina Faso, Mali, etc., etc. And so it is important we have solid energy infrastructure in Ghana so that we can play that role of an energy hub. You also know that Ghana supplies electricity to many of our neighboring countries. And I'm very happy that VRA infrastructure is one of the pipeline projects. But as far as the climate financing is concerned, I associate with the response that you gave, but I just want to remind all of us that 50% of revenue to many African countries come from oil exports. Okay, and so if we respond quickly to what the heavily polluting countries are asking us to do, that means we'll be losing substantial source of revenue to finance our development. We need to think about that. Secondly, it is also important to note that an estimated 500 billion barrels of crude oil will be stranded in the ground in Africa if we succumb to those calls. And we can exploit these resources in an environmentally friendly manner. There is technology and emerging technology that should allow us to exploit these resources to finance our development without causing damage to the environment. Norway is already doing something in that respect. We can also do that. And this is why I want to laud Afreximbank for your leadership in championing the cause of Africa's oil-producing countries to the extent that you've signed an agreement with the African Petroleum Producers Organization, APO, of which Ghana is a member, to establish an African Energy Bank, which Ghana is seeking to host. And Afreximbank is the sole shareholder of this initiative. This bank will help address the financing difficulties oil and gas industry is facing. Financing is becoming tightened and tightened every day because of the so-called energy transition. And I am very confident that Afreximbank will push this initiative further to reality so we can be able to finance our oil and gas industry to benefit our people. And as I said, while doing this, you will also be funding technologies that allow us to exploit these resources in an environmentally friendly manner. So I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. There's so many other questions that I have on my phone, but time would not permit us to get all those questions answered. Fortunately, the PR team is around, they're on ground here, and during the cocktail session, which we would have right after the closing remarks and the final remarks, you can, and I'm speaking directly to the journalists, you can engage the PR team and they'll provide answers for you. For those online, I believe that they know already how those questions will be answered for them. It's unfortunate. I can see there's a lot of appetite on my left-hand side to fill the questions, and there's a lot of, I would say, friendly fire, I would say, coming on my phone. But we've gone way past my supper time for a gammon. So I would kindly invite, for the closing remarks and the final remarks, I would kindly invite His Excellency President Orama to give us his closing remarks, after which I would have the Honorable Minister say the final remarks, and then we would move out. Before then, I would entreat the panelists, I would say, to stay and take a group photo, and then we would all go outside for refreshments. So, President Orama, kindly give us your closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much, MC, and to all our guests, Honorable Minister, Governor, Ministers. Let me once again thank you for creating the time for your very busy schedule to join us here today, and for the governor that got the money going to his account. I know that many people are waiting for you. So I know that you will leave here back to your offices to deal with the issues that are preoccupying your offices these days. So we are really grateful that you found the time to come and support us today. I also like to thank all the journalists online and those who are here physically for coming this evening. It just demonstrates what is going to happen when we gather here in less than 4 weeks. We hope that you will give the discussions today the publicity they deserve. We also hope that you will give the run-up to the event, as well as the event, the positive publicity we all need. We must tell our own stories, because if we don't tell our stories in a good way, we will be compounding our problems because others don't want to tell our stories for us in a good way. So I hope we can count on you to continue to support us. Our communications team, I think Amma is here with her colleagues, will be available to answer any questions you may have. Once again, I would like, on behalf of our board and management, to thank His Excellency President Akufo-Addo agreed to host the annual meetings. We look forward to an eventful, enjoyable, and remarkable 30th annual general meeting and 30th anniversary. Thank you, and have a nice evening.
Thank you very much, President Orama. May I now invite the Honorable Minister.
I also want to thank Mr. President Orama and the Afreximbank on behalf of our government, on behalf of my colleagues here, for choosing to hold the annual general meeting and the 30th anniversary celebration in Ghana, in our very beautiful city of Accra. This is further demonstration of a growing relationship between Ghana and Afreximbank. We will use that opportunity also to deepen that relationship. And I see this relationship is a symbiotic relationship. You help us to grow our economy, we create a strong market, and then you also grow your portfolio. So it's a symbiotic relationship. And this collaboration is the type of collaboration that can help develop African countries. This is the kind of South-South cooperation that we need, that we have strong African institutions supporting African development. We can do it by ourselves, even though we need the support now from other sources. If we put our acts together, we can build together. Let me also add that during our economic recovery efforts, Afreximbank has stood by us. I hope that in the years ahead, you will even stand by us stronger and stronger. I want to thank you all for the opportunity, and I hope that you will all be part of this great celebration, the celebration of an African success. I thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Thank you to all of you, and we look forward to seeing you in June when we have the Afreximbank annual meetings in Accra. Please note it will be from the 18th to 21st right here in Accra. Once again, thank you and have a good evening.